Hi, and thanks for joining us for the Chrome Site Isolation Summit. We'll be live streaming this to a few other offices, and we're recording it to post publicly on chromium.org for other folks outside of Google who might be helping with the effort. Site isolation is a big, ambitious project within the Chrome security team to try to give Chrome a much stronger security model where the sandbox will protect not only the user's computer, but isolate websites from each other as well. The biggest feature that we've been working on to reach this goal is out-of-process iframes, or OOPIF as we abbreviate it, which changes a lot of Chrome's architecture to make it possible to run iframes in a different process from their parent page. And we've gotten far enough along in the implementation of this that we now need all of your help to update other features in Chrome to work with the fact that not all frames will live in the same process anymore. So, for those of you who haven't met us, I'm Charlie Rice. I'm here with a lot of the site isolation team with Nasco, Alex, Daniel's there and back. And we've got about 8 engineers working on the team that are largely part of the Chrome security team, but also some friends who've been helping along the way. We've worked on things like navigation, the process model, content module in general, Blink, and before we launched into this big project for out-of-process iframes. To give you an overview for today, we're going to break it into 2 main sessions, one about changes that are happening within Chromium and another for changes within Blink. In each one, we're going to try to give an overview of the things we've been changing, but then a focus on the things that other features will need to update to work with out-of-process iframes. And we'll have some time for discussion and Q&A in each session, so we'll break for lunch and then come back for the Blink session. And then some time at the end of the day to just break out into individual teams and talk about what your team might need or how we can help with that. We're also around for Tuesday and Wednesday here in Mountain View, and you can feel free to grab any time on our calendars to talk about what your features might need and how we can help. So why are we doing this giant effort to refactor Chrome? The goal for site isolation is to get more benefit out of Chrome Sandbox. And the Sandbox has been a key part of Chrome's security story since it launched in terms of isolating the user from evil websites. It's something where if there is a bug in the renderer process, we want to limit what that web page can do to the user's computer. So it can't install malware or send other files from your machine out to the web. And it's been a critical piece of Chrome's security story. Just in the last year alone, the already publicly disclosed vulnerabilities in Chrome, we have more than 600 vulnerabilities that could have caused this sort of damage to the user's machine that we've fixed, but that have all posed opportunities for attackers to take over the user's machine, and the sandbox has stopped them. So the downside with the sandbox is that it only protects your local machine. It doesn't do anything to protect the sites that you're logged into. And as users have more and more of their lives online, between their Google accounts, their bank accounts, other online accounts, the sandbox really should be doing a better job of protecting those as well. And the issue today is that all of the cookies for those sites, the documents from those websites, must be made accessible to any renderer process, because any renderer process has the ability to it might have an iframe from one of those sites, and it needs to load those cookies or documents. And so in that sense, we're basically trusting Blink to enforce the same origin policy for us. A single renderer process might have a page from both mail.com and evil.com. And if it exploits one of those hundreds of vulnerabilities that Chrome might have, it could then take over your webmail account as well. So we want to do better than this and have the sandbox protect those web accounts. And that means we need to be able to lock a renderer process to a single website, even for things like iframes, where we can actually split the iframe out of one renderer process and host it in a different one. In this way, the browser process can help enforce things like the same origin policy by saying that evil.com's process doesn't have access to any of the cookies from b.com in this example. Now, we also want to keep performance in mind and memory overhead and things like that. So we don't want to have out-of-process iframes for every single cross-site iframe on the web. That would be a lot of extra processes. So we want to limit this to initially a whitelist of sites that are sites that the user will likely log into and that need to be protected. So we're looking to do this on sort of a high priority basis at first, and we'll see how that goes. But this is the goal, is to be able to lock down a renderer process. Yeah, so the question is about the whitelist, and it's about essentially a list of websites that we would want to protect in this way. So whether it was loaded at the top level or in an iframe, it would end up protected. So you'd end up having essentially evil.com probably wouldn't opt in. We wouldn't have this on the list, but say mail.com is. That means anytime you visit mail.com, whether top level or in a render in an iframe, it would be protected. Another question about? So the whitelist is something that we are still working on the plans for. We're looking at some privacy preserving techniques to see what sites users have logged into and then use that to seed an initial list. We'll probably start very small, but try to get it to include sites that we feel need to be protected. And then we'd love to get it up to a higher standard as performance allows, to say every HTTPS site, but we need to look at numbers a little more closely to see how that pans out. Once we have this, we end up getting much stronger protection from Chrome Sandbox for things like cookies, documents, which are HTML, XML, or JSON files, stored passwords, site permissions, HTML5 stored data, and things like this that should be limited to a single website. And the browser process will now be able to enforce that. And as I mentioned, this is a very ambitious effort because of the number of changes that we need to make to support out-of-process iframes in Chrome. We're trying to do it in a very first-class way where Chrome's architecture knows about frames as the way to interact with content. And this has caused a lot of changes within Chrome. But as a result, we end up with Chrome being architected much more like a multi-principal operating system, where you have a browser process as the kernel, and you have lots of user land processes, essentially, which have a principal associated with them. That there's a process for Google.com, and there's a process for other things. And the browser process knows who's running in that process. So the biggest piece for this has been building support for out-of-process iframes. As I mentioned, it's a major change to the architecture. And before, most features in Chrome that need to interact with web content in some way would do it at the page level with classes like RenderViewHost or Page and Blink. And now it needs to be done at the frame level. And this is because not all frames will live in the same process. We should be doing it sort of as we talk to renderer processes. As a result, many classes in Chrome will end up changing. All of the RenderView and RenderViewHost classes that interacted with web content before are going away and being replaced by RenderFrame and RenderFrameHost. And then we have ways to talk about frames that exist in some other process. So Blink now gets a notion of a remote frame, which is essentially a placeholder for a frame in some other process within the current page. And we have equivalents for those placeholders in the content module as well, called RenderFrame proxies. So how far along are we? Well, we've actually got a lot of the infrastructure in place for this already. We're already tracking these frames in the browser process. We've got remote frames in Blink. And you can use it today with this -- site per process flag. This is to represent the security policy where there's one site per process, and that includes all the out-of-process iframe work. And we put out a call last quarter for people to start looking at their features and how this would affect them. And we've already gotten a lot of people starting to update their features. So some features are already finished updating, things like autofill and the push API. Others are well underway. So we're working on things like session history. Accessibility is a long way there, is most of the way there. Dev tools and extensions have both started. WebView has a prototype for using out-of-process iframes instead of the browser plugin within Chrome apps. So there's a lot of work going on already, and we're excited about that. But then this summit will be about making sure that other features in Chrome will also work with this. So it's always fun to show a demo for how far we are. So this is a build of Chrome from last week. It's essentially the Chrome Canary from Friday. And it's using this site per process flag, which you can see here in the terminal, which means that any cross-site iframes, in this case, the whitelist is all sites, will be run in their own process. And we can show a demo of this by going to a page that is quote-unquote evil. It's a page on an untrusted website that loads an iframe to the code review site. And here, NASCO's account is logged into the code review site already, so that web page has NASCO's credentials and it has access to the code that he could be submitting. It's a very important website. And if this were all running in the same process, then this evil page could exploit a bug in the renderer and then take over NASCO's code review site. But we can see in the task manager here that there's actually a separate process for the evil page versus the subframe. And of course, the fun demo in any process model example is if we kill it, we can see that the code review page was actually running in a separate process and just being composited in. So when we kill it, we get this green frame, which will probably end up making look more like the sad tab that Chrome has. But it's a nice demo showing how this actually does provide a separate sandbox process. We can also see this on some real-world pages. Things like TechMeme has some cross-site iframes. And in this case, we've got TechMeme and we've got subframes on Facebook and Twitter. And you can see some of these buttons at the top of the page here. The Twitter example, we can do another little crash, and we get a little green rectangle here in the upper right. We also can get out-of-process iframes as we hover over articles. So these like buttons for each article are each their own out-of-process iframe. And it's also a nice demo of how we still have a lot to go, because today, if you hover over one of these out-of-process iframes, it kills the renderer process. So there's lots of crashes we still need to fix, and we still need help making sure that all the features in Chrome work with this. So if we come back to the slides, our rough schedule for this year is to try and get this launched for real websites by the end of the year. The goal for this quarter is to make out-of-process iframes work across all of Chrome's features. And we've got a Chrome team goal for this in the first quarter. And that will set us up so that in the second quarter we can start enforcing this security policy, which is things like implementing the whitelist, locking down the access to cookies and documents, and so on. Things that once out-of-process iframes are working, we can do and give this security policy some teeth. The goal will be to ship this for extensions that have web pages and iframes in the third quarter as sort of a limited use case, where it's both high profile for security, because extension processes have extra privileges to talk to extension APIs. And we don't want web pages to be able to exploit that process and then use those APIs. And it's also nice that it's a little less general than just the general web, so we can see how that goes and then expand it later. And based on the feedback we get from that, we'll be looking to turn it on for a small whitelist of sites in the fourth quarter. So the goal for today and the next 2 days is to get other Chrome features to start updating to support out-of-process iframes. And this is fixing all the assumptions about all the frames being in the same process and so on. So our first session, NASCO will be talking about the changes we've made in Chromium, and then the changes that need to be made to other Chromium features to reflect this. And then Daniel will be talking about the Blink features after lunch. These slides we'll send out into both site isolation dev at chromium.org after the talk and in the other talk announcements. So we've put some links into other useful resources, things like our project page, design plans, and a FAQ for how to update your features to support out-of-process iframes, as well as a list of the features we know that are already updating. So that's where we are so far. And I'm happy to take more questions at the moment, and then we can turn it over to NASCO to talk about the Chromium changes.